Greetings to all my listeners, all our listeners, all your listeners. I am Rafe and I am making absolutely no sense right now.
Thank you for
Welcome to
pointing
the
it out
XP.
because I wanted to.
It's all good. Well, welcome to the XP Billionaires podcast, where we make a lot of sense or no sense. There is no in between. I am Rafe. I am the host. I am not well. That is okay. But I've got Sky Knight and Irene Rogue to help keep me in check. So, Sky, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm good.
Excellent, excellent. And Irene, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
All right, let's get on with this week's topic. And we have a top three for you today. And this one I think is probably going to be one of my favorites of our top three so far. I think this has been a really good topic. I had a lot of fun thinking about this one. I say that I had a lot of fun doing a lot of these things, but at the same time, I really enjoyed this one. So let's jump right in. So RPGs have always tried to make sure that your hero or heroes always get some amazing gear. And in my opinion, weapons are definitely the priority. Being able to deal the best damage possible is what drives me to keep going on my quests that I go on. And while stats are important, it's also important, especially now that we're in a much more visually stunning age of video games, that the aesthetic of the weapon is considered just as important as the stats. So that look is just as carefully worked on as its in-game balance, and I think that's very important. So this week, we're going to throw stats out of the window and focus on the top three best looking weapon designs in an RPG. It doesn't matter how good it is, it just has to look good in your eyes for it to count. So we're going to start with our number threes. And Irene, you've drawn the short straw, so why don't you begin?
Sure. So my number three was the Keyblade from the Kingdom Hearts series. Now, I specifically wanted to talk about Oathkeeper, but I'm going to put that aside for half a minute while I talk a bit about just the Keyblade in general. So, what I really liked about this particular weapon is that it's very malleable, in that you start off with a very bland looking, just like giant key. But as you progress through the games, you get keychains, which are like little tiny little accessories that go at the bottom of the keyblade that changes the entire design. And from like a mechanic and aesthetics perspective, I really like that explanation that you weren't just getting entirely new keys. You were just getting a tiny piece of something that you would add to the keyblade in order to change its whole form, its abilities, and its like effectiveness essentially. And I thought that that in of itself was kind of cool. But specifically, I wanted to talk about Oathkeeper, which in each Kingdom Hearts game is like a late game Keyblade. And it's this beautiful, like white, spindly looking thing that almost kind of reminds me of stained glass just a little bit. It's got these blue tones a little bit in one spot, and it looks very elegant, but it's one of the most powerful Keyblades in the game, and generally has a great nice little magic boost along with it. It kind of looks like it should. But more than that, on the end of the Keyblade, there's the keychain, right? Which I explained. It's a simple little, like, paupu fruit made by Kyrie. It's not that special. It's not, like, aesthetically beautiful. It's a little charm that's clearly handmade. But it's created this Keyblade that looks resplendent in its beauty, which I thought was a really interesting way to convey, like, Kingdom Hearts is all about how like hearts and emotions and friendships like manifest and like have a real impact at a high level. I'm not going to get into it or I'm going to look crazy because it's Kingdom Hearts.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, but like it's really cool that they had this relatively simple little keychain that was, you know, handmade by a girl, like a teenage girl, make the Keyblade into this beautiful, elegant, and very powerful weapon with a keychain that generally looks kind of cheap isn't the right word, but it's definitely like handcrafted. And it's designed to look like something that a girl would definitely give her crush. That's something that she made herself, right?
Right.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, the way that they did that. They created this this little accessory that would change the whole keyblade, but instead of making it look like the keychain, which is what all the others did, it turned it into something very different. And I think it was more reflective of the emotion that Kairi put into it when she made it. That being said, I shipped Sora and Riku all the way, and I don't know why Kairi is there. Like, I love her keychain.
We'll take it at face value. That's all. That's all good. No worries there.
No worries there.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to my number 3. I'm excited to talk about this one. This is one I don't talk about very often. For me, the number 3 weapon I've chosen is called Noble Fury, and it comes from Suikoden Tactics. This is the weapon of the protagonist Carol. Noble Fury is a one-handed weapon with a blade on each end. Similar, imagine Darth Maul's lightsaber in Star Wars. The difference is that instead of just 2 straight blades, each end offers a curved blade that comes out into about an S shape if you were to hold it upright. Now, there's a small point also protruding from the base of each side, making each blade look kind of similar to a beak or a can opener on a Swiss Army knife. It was just a really unique design, and the way Carol would swing it around, you would have a really good offensive and defensive control over it. Offensively, he would spend a lot more time swinging it so that the bottom half of the blade was doing most of the damage, and then swinging back to the top half would do the rest. So it was he had really good control over the weapon, which I found was really cool. But it was a very simple elegance to what really is just a very, very standard looking weapon. Like, there's no ornate design to it. It's not colored differently. It's just 2 blades with a handle in the middle. But just that shape alone really made it feel unique and special. And watching the way Carol would wield it really helped in showing off its elegance.
Yeah, it's a really cool weapon. I've never seen anything else like it, I don't think.
Well, the closest thing I've able to come up with is if you were not to have the S shape and twist one of the sides of the blade and have them both coming out forward, kind of reminds me of Batleth from Star Trek.
Yeah, that's probably the closest thing.
Yeah, I think that would be the best analogy, is if you twisted a Batleth, and yeah, that would be Noble Fury. So yeah, that's my number 3. Don't have a lot to say about it because, like I said, it's a really plain blade, but it had its own elegance just for being what it was. So I will always give it credit. Let's move on to Sky. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is the Sword of the Creator from Fire Emblem 3 Houses. There's usually some sort of signature weapon in Fire Emblem, and this is it for 3 Houses. It's really special looking, this one. My initial reaction to it was, it's kind of weird. Like, it looks more like bone. And it's kind of plain, but the serrated edges on the blade is kind of neat. At least it's distinct. Like, it's not just another falchion, for instance. And then it split into a whip sword, and I damn near screamed. See, I don't normally play fighting games because I'm terrible at them, but I adore Soul Calibur, and particularly Ivy Valentine. So to have a whip sword, not unlike Ivy's, in an RPG I was already in love with, just made me so happy. Also, it glows.
Yeah, similar reaction for Bloodborne, to be honest. When I picked the cane and found out it turned into a serrated whip sword, I was like, this is the best thing.
I know, there's something just so inherently cool about a whip sword.
Right?
Yeah, and I mean, it was just so awesome to have. And also, like, it was really cool to have a sword that could have a little bit of range on it, because there's not a lot of options that way for swords typically in Fire Emblem. There is a sort of magic sword called the Levin Sword, where if you're not standing right close to the enemy, you can kind of hold the blade in the air and it will zap them with lightning. But that's the only usual exception to it. So there's just so many things that sort of piled on to make this sword not only look cool, but be cool. So I put it as my number 3. Even though it is kind of strange in the fact that it looks more like bone than like metal.
That still makes it, different from your average sword. So they put a little bit more thought into making it that much more different.
Yeah.
So did they make it? Is it a whip sword or a whip spine? If it's made of bone.
I'm not sure if it's actually bone.
Hmm.
It just sort of looks like it. Like, it's hard to know.
The mysteries of life.
But yeah, I mean, it's also a whip sword, and it also has like a serrated edge on the blade. Big serrations too, not just little ones. So that's my number 3.
All right, awesome. No, that's a great choice, and from something recent too. So, like, really, that's really cool that we're still seeing unique designs even today. So
I should
that's
hope so. Graphical engines have come a long way. Giving us bland weapons would be a bit of a shame.
it is kind of true. You're right. All right, let's move on to our number 2s. Irene, let's get it started.
So I picked a somewhat unconventional number 2 in that it's not necessarily the look of the sword that is important, but it's what the sword is. Because the sword actually looks relatively plain. It looks like a giant two-handed sword, but it's not. The sword I'm referring to is Lilacor from Baldur's Gate 2. And anyone who's played Baldur's Gate 2 knows exactly what sword I'm talking about. So you get it. It looks like a normal everyday sword, but when you equip it, it starts to yell at you. It talks. Then the sword is, well, you kind of expect an enchanted talking sword to be like, cool, it's a magical item. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what I was expecting. I think I was expecting it to be like, like a wizard's companion, but a sword,
Right.
It's not. It just wants you to kill things with it. And, like, not even subtly. It'll, like, scream about how much it wants to, like, have blood gushing everywhere. It's like, come on, let's go kill something evil. And it will complain if you stand around because it's not killing things. Like, it just really, really wants to hurt stuff. Constantly. It sounds like a serial killer. Like, it'll cackle maniacally when you get a critical hit. Because it's really proud of itself.
So you have a sociopathic sword?
Yes, it is a sociopathic sword. Like, I can still remember moving into an area and the loading screen would take long enough that Lilacor would get bored and I'd load in and all of a sudden I'd hear, "Ah!" because he was just really bored and wanted to go kill some shit. Just like I was expecting you to be like cool and reverent and wise. He's like, no, stuff me in a goblin's throat. This is gonna be so much fun. Like, that's literally all it wants.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Does this sword have any sort of greater importance, or is it literally just a sociopathic sword?
It's just a sword you can pick up and it talks. It's actually a really good sword, too. You can use it for a very long time. It's like a +3.
Oh my god.
You can get it very early game. It's a +3 sword, and it's a really good sword, so you can use it for a very long time. And that's all it does. It's not story important. It's not a plot character. It's just a sword that wants you to kill things with it very, very badly and is a psycho.
Charming.
It's amazing. It was a bit out of left field, but I loved it anyway. Thanks, BioWare. Please don't close.
Fair enough. Awesome. No, that works too. I mean, it wasn't a physical attribute that made you love the sword, but it's still unique in its own way. So
Yeah,
that
and
works out.
I thought the plainness of the sword was also important to it. Because if it looked really cool, I don't know, the fact that it just kind of looks like a normal ass sword makes the sociopath angle that much more strange, So I thought that, like, the plain appearance of it was actually important to making it successful.
No, that's a completely fair point. Absolutely. All right. Okay, well, let's move on to my number 2. Now, here's where my number 2 deviates a little bit because in this particular instance, I could not pick a single sword, but they do come from the same game. So what I'm referring to are the 7-star swords from Rogue Galaxy. Now, I went through and I looked at these fairly fairly hard, and I wanted to pick just one. I could not decide. Rogue Galaxy is probably one of the largest and most beautiful selections of weapons for an RPG, period. Each one was rendered differently as well. So the only major thing is that upgraded versions of those weapons were typically recolors, but they still were fantastic designs. The Seven Star Swords were the more powerful weapons. They were legendary weapons, and they were meant for Jaster specifically. Design wise, they are actually fairly hard to describe. Like the first one you actually get is at the very beginning of the game, which is called Desert Seeker, and it's actually how the game starts. It's basically a red, ornate, oversized cutlass, where a sword like Cosmolore, it's a crystalline style sword, very reminiscent of the Soul Calibur. You've got Ixion, which had a multi-tier spear point style blade. Basically, it would hurt more coming out of a person than it would going in. Given that kind of jaggedness and design for it. And these are just some of a few of the examples of just some of these wonderful designs. If you haven't seen any of them, or if you haven't looked at Rogue Galaxy, like I urge you to play it, especially if you're a weapons collector, because not only does it have some of the nicest looking weapons in the game, it probably has the most weapons in a game for the PS2. I'm not exaggerating on how many weapons there are. You get so many for each character. So, and it's a lot.
Well, and it's not only that, like all the characters have a sub-weapon too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those all have different designs as well, and there's a ton of them. And they're all really cool for the most part. There's so many different designs. And it's also one of the games from that era that's held up the best graphically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like it
So
has received an HD treatment and is available for your PS4s for I think it's not only $20 Canadian, if that. Typically, and that's regular price. That's not with any sales or anything like that. And you can get it with just a nice HD coat of paint, and it looks fantastic.
I think I'm gonna have to pick it up.
You absolutely should. I mean, it's a game about space pirates. How can you go wrong?
Fair.
it's really good. It's actiony, so I mean that would appeal to you. The visuals are just so gorgeous. It was the first game Level 5 did in that same style that they used for Ni no Kuni.
Mm-hmm. Like, I've loved their stuff previously. Like Dark Cloud 2 is one of my favorite games of all time.
Yeah. And like Rogue Galaxy is one that you can really sink your teeth into.
Yeah.
There's a lot of game there.
Yeah, like with Rogue Galaxy, it sucked me in a way that no Star Ocean game ever could.
Yeah, Star Ocean is definitely the esoteric, like, I think I'm smart discussion of sci-fi video games.
Yeah, no, this one took the cake for sci-fi RPGs. Xenosaga would be the close second. Anyway, we're deviating here. We're getting on to a different topic, but let's move on. Sky, what is your number 2?
My number 2 is super weird. This is Sulfur from Manichemia, Alchemists of Alrevis. Sulfur is the protagonist's cat. He's Vane's cat, who goes everywhere with him. Vane also talks to him, but is also the only one who can understand him.
He's Vane's therapy cat.
In a sense.
He's Vane's therapy cat the same way Mona is Akira's therapy cat from Persona 5.
So anyway, when Vane goes into battle, Sulfur shapeshifts into his weapon. Now, how or why this happens involves major story spoilers. So all I will say is Sulfur makes an awesome looking weapon. He becomes this really funky arm-mounted blade with a creepy red eye in the middle. And I love an original weapon concept, and it's all the more if it's tied into the story. Just seeing Sulfur sort of transform up, he kind of jumps up and then transforms into this weapon around Vane's hand. It's crazy, and it happens every fight. It's just like, Who thought of this? Who thought of this?
Actually, I'll just to interject quick, sorry. For the Marvel fans out there, the way it envelops onto Vane's arm is very reminiscent of Eddie Brock becoming Venom.
That's a good analog, yeah.
Yeah, it's all like, stringy and gooey.
Yeah. So yeah, Sulfur has really stayed with me despite it being years since I played this game. And like I said, this is all tied into the plot, so I can't say too much, but yeah, it's awesome.
No, that was definitely a good pick. I like that one a lot. But that being said, it's still not the best, so I guess it's time for us to find out what the best are. So, Irene, what is your number one weapon design?
So I thought long and hard about this, and I really wanted to pick something that really matched the tone of the game. And I landed on Scarborough Fair from Bayonetta, her 4 pink pistols. And what I really liked about Scarborough Fair and their design was how they completed, not only mechanically completed the gameplay, but also completed the character. So for those of you who haven't played Bayonetta, and if you like action games, you totally should, Scarborough Fair is a set of 4 pistols called parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, including little charms for each of the spices, because of course, that Bayonetta uses to fight angels. And they're pink. They're like hand cannons, to be honest. They're enormous. And she wields 2 of them in her hands, and 2 of them are attached to her heels, her giant stiletto heels. When she kicks, of course, the guns fire. They're really cool. And what I really liked about the addition of like the sort of like folk song aesthetic name to it was that a lot of the music for Bayonetta was also, sort of modernized, old-timey sort of jazz music. So one of the main themes for the first game was a cover of Fly Me to the Moon. And I thought it sort of goes along with the musical setting, it goes along with the character, it goes along with the absolute ridiculousness of Bayonetta just in general, where like she's got guns just strapped to her feet, and that's normal.
I'm sure she found a way.
Oh yeah, I'm sure she fires them with magic because otherwise there's no way it would actually work properly in real life. These things are like the length of her forearm. Like they're not small. The Scarborough Fair guns, they are pretty substantial. That's why I mean when they say they're like hand cannons, to be honest. They're double-barreled, they're enormous, and they're pretty. They're colorful, and they're aesthetically interesting, and because of like the placement on Bayonetta as a character, it really helps drive home the over-the-top nature of the game, and it really makes for really interesting gameplay, because you've got, the option, like your kicks and punches are punctuated by bullets just flying everywhere. It's a lot of fun.
It sounds fun. I mean, pink and vibrant on someone like Bayonetta, that seems to work out. So
yeah, and like her clothes, like they tend to be like black, right? They're because that's the color her hair is, and her clothes are made out of her hair. It's magic. I swear to God, it's not as gross as it sounds in the game. It looks like a leather bodysuit, but they stand out on the character as well. They match the few little red and pink accents she's got going on her costume, and they fit, but they also act as like focal points for the character model as well, because not only do you have like the pink guns, but you've got like the giant centers, like these big, I don't know what exactly to call them, but like where the bullet chamber would be, they have like these green, pink, blue, and white gemstones like right in the middle, and they're quite large and quite pretty. And of course, the game, because it's more modern, they managed to render in the tiniest little detail in terms of like the charms on the end that correspond to the various spices that the Scarborough Fair is named for. I'm not entirely sure I can pick them out, but they're definitely each unique.
no, that's certainly awesome. That's a really fun design.
For those who don't know the reference, Scarborough Fair is a folk song where one of the repeating lines is parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme.
By Simon and Garfunkel, yeah. It's an interesting decision for them to make, because, like, Simon and Garfunkel, lots of, like, guitars and soft music and soft vocals, and it's just explosions. Explosions and kicking and giant feet and heels coming out of nowhere to stomp on angels until they are dead.
Maybe this is the version by Cylon and Garfunkel, from Futurama.
Potentially.
Of course.
But I like the idea that they kind of tied in the sort of, new jazz age aesthetic to Bayonetta all the way into the weaponry and just naming the weaponry. It was very clever. And even in Bayonetta 2, they kind of continue on the theme where they have the Love is Blue guns and the theme is cover of Moon River. They really get into that aesthetic, and I like it. They did a really good job there. And honestly, Bayonetta is one of my favorite games of all time. So I'm kind of happy to be able to talk about the Scarborough Fair guns on this podcast. Honestly, a lot of her weapons are really interesting, but they're the iconic ones. So that's why I picked them.
All right, awesome. That's definitely an awesome choice. All right, next up will be mine. So my number one comes from .hackgu. And for those who know me, this will come as no surprise. For those who don't, I'll give you some backstory. But the weapon I've chosen is the Ticking Death. And so here's a quick background about me personally. I love scythes. So this started from my days of tabletop role-playing in a system called Blue Rose, when I discovered that a scythe had a ×4 critical damage multiplier. And since my character was going to be the party's beat stick, I went with it and leveled up with specific feats to make critical hitting easier. In fact, for those who need to want to know, the name Rafe is inspired by that character, who I had named Rafe the Grim. So that's a little bit of history on where my name comes from. That's my origin story, if you will. But going back to it, when I saw Haseo pull out a scythe in the opening cinematic .hackgu, I knew at some point there was going to be a scythe that was even more awesome looking than the one that he pulled out right then and there. And I was certainly right. It basically looks like it has a laser blade. And the Ticking Death is not only massive, but the rest of the weapon and its design is pitch black, making it just a wholly awesome and demonic look. The look itself is made even more awesome with the design of Haseo's third form as an adept rogue, where he basically kind of has the same kind of accents on his shoulders and on his sides, and has this weird tail-looking thing on the back of his outfit that just really matches the accents that are coming out from the handle of Ticking Death. Even after Haseo gets his X form, it's still something terrifying to behold if you were on the receiving end of it. And I think is an absolutely fantastic sight to behold when looking at it. I know it's an upgraded form of it where it gets recolored at one point too, so you do get to keep using the weapon for a while, but then at least you get a slightly different look to it down the road. But it's a scythe. It looks evil. It was used by an amazing character, and that's why it takes the number one spot for me.
I mean, scythe, I was actually surprised your entire list wasn't all scythes.
Yeah, no. I definitely like variety, but
And they're not all that common.
No, that's the thing. Not a lot of characters in RPGs, at least, they're not usually options. Still in Final Fantasy XIV, there's still a scythe user that's missing. We have not gotten a scythe DPS yet, so that would be interesting if they ever add one. I'm sure they will, because they like money.
And I'll play a free weekend and get that class when the time comes. Don't get me wrong, but no, I can still only think of a handful of games right now where I can think of an actual scythe wielder.
There's Lorelei in Suikoden 2 as well.
Yeah, I definitely did not remember that. And you'd think there'd be more scythe wielders in a game like Suikoden with so many characters, but
yeah, it's you think they would actually get on having a wide variety of weapons, because we have 108 playable characters. I guess one of them can have a scythe. One of them probably is gonna fight with a frying pan, so let's do this shit.
Yeah. But all right. Well, on that note, let's finish things off. Sky, what is your number one weapon choice?
All right. So my number one is the Demon Sword Jorth from Knights of Azure. Now, it takes my top pick because it's unbelievably epic looking weapon that just becomes cooler as you get along. Its aesthetic is very demony. It wouldn't look out of place in something like Devil May Cry, if that helps you visualize it. Very spiky, red, cool. Now, this sword is used, I hesitate to say belongs to, the protagonist, Arnis. It's powered up by the blue demon blood that Arnis collects. Jorth, as you progress through the game, gains the ability to transform into other weapons as well. Dual daggers, dual guns, a hammer, and finally a powered up version of the initial sword form. So it is unbelievably useful, deeply tied into the story, and looks cool. So it takes my number 1 spot.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is one of the games we either have only talked about in very brief passing, or is one that we haven't talked about at all. Like, I can't remember. I mean, we're on to 40 episodes now. I can't be 100% sure what we haven't talked about, but I barely remember any talk about Knights of Azure. So it's nice that we're giving the other Gust IP some credit.
And yeah, I'm also surprised we haven't talked about Knights of Azure, because that is a game that like Sky talks a lot about in general. Just when we're not podcasting, apparently.
Apparently. Well, it's a very different sort of game in many ways. So, some games sort of eliminate themselves from our different topics because they deviate from the RPG formula in certain ways, right? So, it means some games don't come up as much as others do.
Bayonetta is the same category for me. I'm surprised I haven't talked more about it.
That's something we can discuss down the road. We could talk about games that really deviate from the RPG format, but at heart still are. And I think that'd be a good topic down the road.
Alrighty.
All right. Well, you've got our number 1s, you've got our number 2s, you got our number 3s. Nothing else left for us to say here this week, I'm afraid, guys. So if you guys have a weapon design that you think is really awesome and you want to share it with us, you can do that with us in many different ways. You can reach out to me through Twitter at BillionairesXP, or you can find me on Instagram at Rayfe, or drop me a line during one of my Twitch streams, which is typically Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. Sky, where can everyone find you?
I'm at SkyKnightXP on Twitter and Twitch. I'm at skyknight.xp on Instagram. And if you want to come out and see me stream, I do Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Alrighty. And Irene, where can everyone find you?
You can find me at irogue_XP on Twitter and Twitch. I normally stream on Thursdays at 7. Though just recently I had a special stream for Man of Medan, so... and I'm planning to finish that off, so hopefully come check it out if you enjoy horror games. I've already lost 1 person.
Alrighty. And if you're listening to us after we've launched, there'll be a transcript ready at our website at xpbillionaires.wordpress.com. And that's courtesy of our XP Hobo, Hannah Bard. And if you're just picking this up on its release day, give us a couple of days and we'll have it there as soon as possible. And as always, don't forget to check out all of our big updates on our Ko-fi page. We try to keep all of our exclusive streams or any big news that we're doing there, and we'll share that out as often as we can. So if you see a post, please have a look at it. If you like what we're doing, please send us a coffee. If not, share the post. Just get the word out about what we're doing and what we're about. We would definitely appreciate that. All right. Well, that's going to be all the time we have for this week. And remember, the better your blade, the more likely you'll keep gaming. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.